Okay, well, welcome to our weekly series, interviewing key people from around the world of wine for VINEX. This week we're heading off to Bordeaux. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go this year for the Entrepreneurs, but we're very fortunate to be able to welcome Allan Sichel, who is the Vice President of the Bordeaux Wine Council, the CIVB in Bordeaux. Was also a producer himself with Maison Sichel. So welcome, Allan. Hope all well with you.
Nice to see you, Richard, again, and welcome to all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so we'll normally meet in London, but at least I am in London, at least. Good. Okay. Well, just thought we'd go through the situation in Bordeaux in terms of the production from last year, but also looking ahead to this year, and then how the current crisis is affecting Bordeaux. But I understand this week there's been quite a lot of difficulty in Bordeaux with the hail, and perhaps give us an update on how damaging that has been.
It's nothing unusual, and it happens every year to a certain extent in Bordeaux. Of course, we do get hailstorms. What is unusual is that we've had hailstorms this soon in the season. Yeah. Usually things that happen later in June, sometimes July. Two main worries in Bordeaux generally at this time of year is hailstorms and frost. And we've had a little bit of both this year. Of course, it's very damaging and devastating for those people that are hit. But thankfully for the area as a whole, it's only relatively small areas that were damaged.
Okay, fair enough. So before we sort of go into how the COVID situation is affecting Bordeaux now, could you perhaps just reflect on 2019 harvest and how production has been over the last year, and what the overall market position was going into February, March this year?
Yes, 2019 vintage. Overall, people are delighted with the quality of the wines, and especially after 2017, where we were severely hit by frost. Yeah. 2018, there was badly affected by mildew. 2019 was a much more peaceful harvest. We had a fairly damp spring in June, which affected flowering.
Yeah,
that had some impact on the quantity. But then a very dry, very hot summer, which was fantastic, and beautiful harvesting conditions. The result of all that is that some terroirs that were able to retain sufficient water.
Yeah.
Then the grapes are absolutely fantastic, very rich, very deep. The wines are velvety, they're round, they have great depth. In other terroirs that might have suffered from the drought, then sometimes it's more difficult to achieve the full vegetative cycle. Yeah. And that can have led to quite a lot of sorting in the vineyards to produce the wine they're looking for. Overall, a very good vintage. And it'd be very interesting, though, as many, I'm just as frustrated as all the VINEX viewers, because we haven't actually had a chance to taste so many of these wines because of the lockdown.
And in terms of the production size and compared to previous years, I mean, obviously the quality you mentioned is much improved, but where were we on production levels, volumes?
So in terms of volume, it's an average size of about 5 million hectolitres. Which is comparable to 2018, and that is a result of the drought. I was saying how good conditions were, but with a lack of water during the summer and the very heavy drought and warm winds, there's a lot of the moisture dried out. Okay. So that reduced the volume, the potential volume. So, but it's still it's a good-sized harvest and certainly a relief after 2 years ago.
Good. So, look, bringing things to the current day. I mean, in terms of how the situation has evolved. I mean, obviously we know France has been in lockdown for quite a while, but in terms of Bordeaux and the impact on producers and day-to-day life there? Can you give us a feel for how things have happened in Bordeaux?
Well, it was, of course, as it was for everyone, a big shock to have to adapt to the pandemic. The first thing was to adjust for work in the vineyards. And of course, nature is not waiting, and the sun is out, and the heat is there, and we get the rain, and the vines are growing very quickly. About a couple of weeks early on the normal cycle, and a lot of work to be carried out every day. There was some worry to start with manpower availability.
Yeah.
People were worried they won't be able to get the workers in the vineyards, and after a bit of thought and gathering, then that was actually overcome. People are spread out a lot more in the vineyards. Instead of working row by row, they're spread out every 3 rows or so. In the vineyard, it's quite easy to do that. In the cellars, tendering for the previous vintage and looking after that, so people are reducing their presence, and especially being careful that all the barrier measures and distancing. Offices are usually closed. Everything to do with, actually, which isn't too difficult, people can be working from home, but as sales have dropped very significantly, they're able to cope with that with less working hours.
So
of course, everything to do with visits is completely shut down.
And then in terms of the actual movement of wine, be it domestically and then for export, what you mentioned there, sort of a drop in sales. What's been the impact in terms of being able to move wine around and get it in around France and the rest of the world?
Bordeaux, 55% of volumes produced in the Gironde actually consumed in France, so very heavily dependent on the home market. Of that very significant proportion, there's 45% which is consumed on the on-trade.
Yeah.
So Bordeaux is very dependent on the on-trade, and that has been, of course, completely shut off.
Yeah.
If supermarkets are doing rather better, but what seems to be growing on the wine sector in supermarkets is the lower end, the bag-in-box, easy access, easy wines for drinking at home. And Bordeaux is not actually benefiting from that growth. Online is developing, and that's helping Bordeaux rather more. Online business is developing quite significantly. When it comes to organising the shipments, then of course there are restrictions with the transport companies. They're confronted with various difficulties in terms of organising the social distances and being careful. So it usually takes a little bit longer. And also rather more expensive because they're faced with extra costs. So we're seeing that transport costs are going up. It takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit more expensive, but overall, we're able to ship any order that we do actually get. That's for France, and it's actually true across the world. We're seeing trade beginning to pick up in China, which was completely shut down for the first 3 months of the year. China's the #1 export market for Bordeaux wine, so it's very important for us. And what we're suffering from is a lack of availability of containers too. Because a reduction in worldwide trade means that it's more difficult and takes longer to find empty containers for us to fill and ship.
So in terms of, is it too early to say what the impact on sales has actually been? I mean, I know we're still very much.
It's very, in terms of, if we go back to 2019, because that's the only real overall figures we have. Our figures for the Bordeaux industry are produced by customs, and so we get those about 3 months after the period end. 2019, we're already suffering. There was a lot of uncertainty about Brexit, although that was more of an excuse and a worry, and a lack of visibility didn't actually affect trade at all with the UK. That's been very healthy. And for the UK, sales were stable in volume and up by 15% in value during 2019.
15 or 50, sorry?
15% in value.
Right, okay.
In 2019. China was more difficult. We've had a slowdown in China for the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, and that continued. So we're down in China by about 20% in value.
Yeah.
In America, a very important market for Bordeaux. It's the #2 export destination for Bordeaux wines, with what we call the Trump tax, which adds 25% cost since October last year. It was looking like a good year, progressing at the rate of 4%, but of course was hit at the tail end of the year where, of course, 25% tax severely affected the volumes exported. Coming back to 2020 with the COVID-19 situation, then we don't have overall measures of what is going to happen. But when we talk to wine merchants and for our Allan Sichel business, we're 60% down. So not a total standstill. We're doing 40% of what we would normally be doing.
And is the hope that with almost China acting like kind of a litmus test, I suppose, for the rest of the world, really? I mean, I know China's lockdown was potentially earlier and quicker than most countries, but do you look at China as being a guiding light for other countries in terms of how soon wine sales might be able to recover?
I think so. It was in lockdown sooner. It had, from what I understand, 8 weeks lockdown, which is what we're coming to in France. Yeah. Confinement is going to be ended or progressively end from next week, 11th of May. And it'll take time, very progressively. But it does seem to look like a very similar pattern in every country, whatever the strategy in combating the pandemic has been, which is quite interesting. So it takes us 8 weeks lockdown, then it takes a couple of months to gradually adjust to the new measures. And people need to trade, people need to do business, they need to work. And that's certainly what we're beginning to feel on the Chinese market, where there is renewed interest and very slowly, very gradually, restaurants opening again and people are drinking Bordeaux wines.
And do you think kind of, in a sort of ironically, the fact we're talking here now on Zoom, which perhaps we wouldn't have done, say, 3 months ago. I mean, do you think perhaps we actually are better connected internationally than we might have been in normal times when we kind of rely on trade fairs to meet up, and now people are being able to have these kind of international conversations all the time? I mean, there's so many discussions taking place.
Absolutely, yes, you're absolutely right. And I was amazed at how easily we adjusted to the use of all these digital tools, only within our own company, where we have 50 members of staff, and at least 40 of them have now overnight, actually, were asked to work from home, and they plugged in their computer and they were given the right passwords and were accessing our system, and they work every day from home, and that's been working very well. And from a business point of view, yes, using Zoom, organising meetings, talking to people, and all these are things that we always thought might be possible. Tests were not always very conclusive, and it was almost easier to jump on a plane and go and see the person.
Yeah.
And I think we are going to be adjusting to these new tools, and I think that will be actually very useful to us all.
And do you think, I mean, in terms of looking at the producers themselves and the growers, well, perhaps not the growers, more the producers, I mean, do you think they will start looking at how they operate in terms of, relying on the traditional routes, whether or not they'll start exploring more digital options and,
Certainly, this lockdown has given people time to think and try out new methods. And digital is certainly something that is massively expanding, whether it be sending out messages on social media, taking part in virtual tastings, participating in webinars, building up films, small audio films that are then sent out or made accessible. And all that is certainly something that we as the CIVB want to encourage, because we feel it's very important to have that human contact with the consumer, with the distributor, so they actually have a face and a name and a philosophy to attach to a wine.
Yeah.
And that's becoming increasingly important, and is something we're addressing, encouraging, and helping too. We have in Bordeaux the L'École du Vin, which works very well, which is very well equipped, does an enormous amount for staff training. It's primarily destined for professionals,
Yeah.
but also enthusiastic end consumers, to give out the messages and show Bordeaux in all its diversity, and making it interesting and we hope captivating.
So do you think, with the fact that more people are buying wine online now, consumers, that actually there's even more of a need for producers to really make sure their websites are fully functional, for when people are checking them out online?
Were they're looking at their websites, never completely committed to it, and they're too late to build up a really good website and jumping completely to fully digital and learning all these new skills.
Okay.
And we're there to help them. So the CIVB wants to help people to be high performing from that point of view.
But just looking at it from a more positive point of view, in terms of some of the trade activity that you have got planned for this year, and I know in the UK, for example, you planned on doing a Bordeaux day. In fact, actually, this wasn't it supposed to be sometime this week? I think your Bordeaux day.
Yes, we've had to postpone it, and we hope to be able to hold it in September. It's a full Bordeaux day. We used to have a trade briefing a day, which was usually a morning, and we present figures and results. And now we're making it a much more in-depth experience. We're going to have agents and importers there presenting their selection of 10 to 12 Bordeaux wines. So we'll have 200 wines that are already imported to be shown. We'll have a round table to talk about sustainability. We'll have special events around digital, and also very keen on a brand new category, the 50 hot Bordeaux selection. We used to have everyday Bordeaux selection, and now our 50 hot Bordeaux selection is much more focused in 4 categories, with the organic, with the fresh and crispy for the whites and the crémant, with the easy fruity wines, and also 4th category of the more robust and complex wines. And so there'll be a lot of communication around that 50 selection from a UK jury, which gives it a lot of sense.
Good, okay. And I guess, the UK being such a key part of the Bordeaux export strategy, I suppose, I guess, are you using the UK as a sort of a test bed for that, really, in terms of how well that works and how you can use your top 50 in your Bordeaux day, perhaps for other markets down the line?
Absolutely. UK is always a very good test bench. It's always very good to test new concepts on the UK market. Another dimension is we want to bring out the human side of all these wines and show the growers that are producing them. So we're going to intensify that, of course, it seems a bit incongruous in the present context, but what we want to show the faces and bring the growers to the UK and help people who are not yet exporting their wine to the UK, giving them the tools and the keys to access that very important market. And as we build up new solutions, then of course they can also be used on other important markets.
Okay, so going back to our previous comments, this situation, this move to online and digital, I guess, will, I suppose, encourage more producers to get involved and give them the tools and the opportunity to do that as well. Yes,
and we were helping them do that. We held a webinar on that was just last week, which was collected about 200 viewers, people who, and the subject was to access the UK market. And that webinar was held simultaneously to all those people who subscribe, but then it's followed up by individual coaching on a one-to-one basis through visio conferences, and again, to help them access the UK market specifically. Avoid them spending time and money making mistakes that other people have tried and tested, and giving them the keys of how to be more successful on the UK market. And so we hope that is going to bring more wines, more choice, and a greater selection for buyers, and making the whole Bordeaux experience even more engaging.
Excellent. All right. Well, good to see how that develops. And I guess, suppose is it September the 9th you're planning on doing the Bordeaux Day in the UK, is it? Yeah.
Exactly, September the 9th, Bordeaux Day. And we hope to be able to hold it, but we're preparing for that.
Yeah.
If we can't hold it on 9th of September, it'll be postponed. But the concept is we're committed to the new concept.
Yeah. Okay. And it sounds like lots of the elements of it can take place online anyway, if need be. So in terms of looking ahead, I mean, can you just give a view on, is it, I mean, I don't know if it's too early to say about harvest for 2020 and where we are with that?
It's a bit early to talk about the harvest 2020. Things are just beginning, but the vines are going nicely. What it does bring me to is talking about sustainability, where growers are changing their methods towards a lot of growers are converting either to organic, to biodynamic, and of course our French certification, which is very wide-ranging, HVE3, bit of a mouthful, but Haute Valeur Environnementale, which takes in a number of issues in favour of the environment, developing biodiversity, being careful of the carbon footprint, reducing water consumption, and protecting the environment as a whole. So that is something that's very engaging, and nothing to do with the present situation, but it's certainly in relation with the way work is carried out on the vineyard. One thing, we're keeping an eye on the weather, of course, and we're expecting very heavy downfall over the next weekend. And then it causes other problems. Once the soil gets very damp, then the tractors can't get in, and yet you have to protect the vineyard. So it's also always a headache to plan ahead, but that is everyday life when you're a vine grower.
But you mentioned, I mean, with China, the UK, and America. I mean, they're all three markets that are looking more and more for sustainable wines, aren't they? I mean, I can remember.
And I think, and certainly in France too, I think it is a worldwide phenomenon. We're looking at societal responsibility, and we have to respond to that. Consumers, people who live near the vineyards too, are asking for that, asking for sustainability, less use of pesticides, less toxic products, and being very respectful, not only of the vineyard itself and the soil it's growing on, but the whole environment, biodiversity, and of course the local community. In terms of nuisance, whether it be noise, whether it be smell, whether it be use of pesticides, all these are issues that we're addressing completely and wholeheartedly to respond to what is only the beginning, we feel, and we really want Bordeaux to be the worldwide leaders in terms of societal responsibility.
Yeah, the world obviously follows Bordeaux very closely. I mean, there's so much influence that Bordeaux has. I mean, one of those areas has been the potential of different varieties in Bordeaux as well, isn't it, in terms of...
Yes, absolutely. So that is that has answers a double-pronged problem. One of them is reducing the use of pesticides, and so is developing grape varieties that could potentially be resistant to mildew, especially. And the other thing is also grape varieties that will help us resist the climate change. There's no doubt that climate change is a reality. Bordeaux has rather benefited from that over the last 20 years. We're getting more sunshine, we're getting riper grapes, and that's helping the quality of the wines. But if it goes much further, then it's going to change things too far in getting overripe grapes. There are answers to that. I mean, as grapes had difficulty ripening every year, there was a greater proportion of Merlot that was being planted. Yeah. And now I think it's 65% of the vineyard is planted in Merlot. But certainly people are looking much more at replacing Merlot by Cabernet Sauvignon, which is later ripening, that takes more sunshine. Never under our latitude does it reach any feeling of over-ripeness. But also new varieties. More people are using Petit Verdot. More and more people are planting Cabernet Franc, and that gives more minerality, more sophistication to the vine, and more adjusted to climate change.
Interesting, yeah. Well, I suppose it'd be fascinating how that develops over the coming years, really, and which varieties really pick up and could sort of change the kind of the vineyard makeup in Bordeaux in the next few years.
But the idea, of course, is to maintain the style of Bordeaux wines with its balance, its elegance, its digestibility. And we feel that everything will have to change so that doesn't change.
Okay, fair enough.
And it'd be vinification methods, temperature control, it's the way the vines are pruned sometimes, canopy management, the things that we can act on short term. A few years ago, 20 years ago, one wanted to raise the foliage area to encourage photosynthesis and get better ripening. Now we're tending to reduce canopy to slow everything down.
Okay, good. Okay, so just in terms of our last few minutes, I mean, you mentioned there France is going to start to come out of its lockdown hopefully next week. Looking forward over the next few months, I mean, do you look at the picture? Are you sort of optimistic, pessimistic about where we're going to go, where Bordeaux will go over the next few months?
It's difficult to have any clear visibility on what's going to happen in the next few months. One big issue, of course, is en primeur.
Yeah.
Normally, we'd be in the middle of the en primeur campaign. People would have had a chance to taste all the 2019s. Critics would be publishing their comments, and that we'd be beginning to offer the wines. At one stage, it was considered there wouldn't be an en primeur campaign at all. But now there's a lot of talk of organising this. It'll be later on, but in June, July, probably much shorter, much quicker. Of course, we have to imagine all sorts of different configuration in terms of giving the chance to people who are tasting these wines. They won't be able to come to Bordeaux as they normally do the first week of April, when we get up to 5,000 people coming from all over the world. But so the option is rather to send samples to them.
Yeah, okay.
And rather than each grower doing that on his own back and individually, then the various organisations, whether it be l'Union des Grands Crus, the Syndicat des Crus Classés, the Syndicat des Crus de Saint-Émilion, people are getting together, getting organised to have big shipments sent to the main buyers and wine critics and wine writers.
Yeah, and I guess that's another interesting fallout, well, not fallout necessarily, but a kind of consequence. There's been quite a lot of talk, hasn't there, about trying to modernise the en-primeur system in any case. So perhaps this has also given people a chance to talk and think differently and be a bit more open-minded about what other options there are for how en-primeur works.
Well, I think it's like anything. As long as things work,
yes, exactly. Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Okay.
And and that's the difficulty. An en-primeur campaign can only work really if there's a collective effort. You can't have some people doing it in March, some doing it in September, some people the following year. It has to be a collective message as given the world over. And certainly, well, this lockdown situation has generated an awful lot of discussion and maybe actually very positively developed a more cohesion and collective get together in finding solutions together rather than each one of us individually. So I think that's a positive aspect.
Okay, well, that perhaps brings us to a final point, really. I mean, what lessons do you think, as a region, you've already learned from this, and what kind of implications it might have on the future going forward?
I think one observation is the resilience of the trade, the business, the growers. I think considering the whole world is on lockdown virtually, we're still, from our point of view, still doing 40% business, which is a severe drop, but there's still a fair amount of business being done. So that's very encouraging. Finding new ways of working and addressing new expectation levels, whether it be social responsibility, everything to do with the farming, but people are very much more careful. I think all this, it's just an acceleration of that awareness of trading locally, of not necessarily buying things that come from the other side of the world. Of course, this is something, Bordeaux actually needs worldwide trade. I mean, we ship everywhere, but that can still be done in a more respectful and less wasteful manner. And I think that certainly is something that we're all becoming much more careful of. And this lockdown situation is bringing it home even more strongly and acting as an accelerator to that awareness level.
Yeah, I think that's my big takeaway from all this really is you know, somebody who spends my day to day looking at trends and looking at what's happening in the general sense. I think that acceleration of so many different trends that have been happening behind the scenes, some more upfront than others. And I think these last few months have really kind of like, well, the last few weeks have felt like months, and then I suppose the last 6 months will feel like a year to lots of us. But great. Well, thanks for your time, Alan. It's been really good catching up with you again, and wish you and all all your producers and people in Bordeaux all the best.
Thank you very much, Richard. We had great pleasure talking to you, and we're looking at this, despite all the uncertainties, still we're remaining very positive and look forward to the end of it, even if it does drag on a bit.
Yeah, and I shall appreciate my steak frite in Bordeaux even more next time I'm there. Okay, cheers, thank you.
Right, thank you. Bye-bye.